the span of control, span of influence they have, and they're not. They're more interested in filling their pockets with Patreon dollars than they are about, seriously, I've got a platform and I could affect change. But no, I'm more interested in making sure I tell my audience what they want to hear. At least you went out there and tried. I wish more people on whatever level they are, whether it's, a YouTube, a podcast, a blog, or if they just have a Facebook page that's their personal Facebook page, that they would go do that. At least try it.
Yeah. And actually, I'll take this opportunity now. If any of the listeners actually have a believer as a friend that can actually sit down and tell their story, they're more than welcome to come on. I'm not going to bash them. The only time that anyone, in my opinion, that deserves to be, talked about is whenever you've done something stupid. But skeptics do stupid stuff and atheists do stupid stuff. But I guess that's a bad way to actually ask this question. But no, I welcome any and all. So if you guys have a friend that would like to sit down and have a nice conversation, as you've been listening throughout these last episodes, since we started, they're more than welcome to come on and we'll talk. And it doesn't have to be all about religion. We can talk about anything, I've proven that time and time again. This show is about any and everything. It's the stories part, not necessarily the secular part.
Well, and that's what I think that's why it's so genius what you're trying to do with it, because if we make those, I said that in one of my episodes a long time ago, those multiple points of contact, all of us have commonalities. The human experience, we have at least one commonality, but we have many commonalities. And if we can start making those connections, we can start relating on that level like you're talking about. And that's where the change actually starts happening, the progressive change. And that's, I'll be honest, those are the people I'm going to stand beside, is the people who are interested in not necessarily befriending, but at least platforming and aligning with anyone, whether they're a believer or not, who wants to make progressive steps in whatever the next step of human evolution is, who wants to make those steps. And that's what you were doing. So I hope someone takes you up on that offer.
Yeah. Yeah. You know me, and the guy, as the listeners get more and more after, this Paul will be coming out. He will be our 7th one, because we have Bob that was last week. So whenever you come out the Monday after next, I challenge anyone to go back through and see where I was overly critical of anyone, But yeah, like you said, any and all comers are welcome. And with that, I know we're getting ready to wrap up a little bit. Let's talk about the projects that you actually do have going on.
Deal.
We've already discussed the Cube. Anything exciting, new, or anything that's coming up that you would like to talk about on the Q itself?
The Q is going to be interesting. It always will be. Actually, listeners of this show will probably know Chris and Corinne. They're actually coming up on an episode where I recorded with them months ago, and we actually talked about safe spaces. So it may be a little dated, but we're actually going to have that coming up in a couple episodes. I'm scanning as I look now, and yeah, it looks like episode 118 will be Chris and Corinne, unless something breaks. The next one is going to be an interesting one. I recorded this back in November. I've been putting it off and off and off, and I decided to release it about 2 weeks ago. I've got everything packaged 2 weeks ago to release on Friday of this week. Patrons already have it. It's called Atheism as a Business. I've grown tired of people taking advantage of you, the listeners. A lot of you are hurt. A lot of you are in bad situations because of your atheism. Some of you have gotten divorces. Some of you have to hide who you are to your employer. Some of you have lost custody of your children. And there are people who are content creators, my peers, who are leveraging your pain to get dollars from you. And I start calling them out in that episode. So that'll be fun. I'll lose a lot of friends in that one. And then episode 119 is a favorite of mine, is because I start actually talking about a more positive thing. I start talking about things I'm grateful for, and I know A lot of us will cringe when that word is used, but in episode 119, I call it the cleanse. Whenever that comes out a few weeks down the road, I'll actually start talking about some of the things I'm actually grateful for, and I challenge my listeners to look at their own lives and try to associate my anecdote with their own lives, make that juxtaposition and see if there's things relative to the topic I talk about in each of those episodes that they'll be grateful for. So that'll come out in 119. And then my dear friend Elsa, whoop, whoop, I will be interviewing her in episode 120. So that's what's coming in the queue.
Okay. One thing, and I don't know if you actually know, whenever we do our ads, we call them ads, but all it is publicity spots for the rest of our podcasts in Podheld Media. Trust me, we make $0 on this just because this is a labor of love.
Right.
All right, your next one, and I know you have going on, which I haven't seen here recently, is Polite Conversations with you and Ina Nice Mangoes, right?
Right. But I've also got Your Voice and Atheist Apocalypse too. Those are still going on.
Your Voice. Along with the Q, what's Your Voice? Now, this is something that's pretty interesting project for Chris, and this is something that the listeners of this podcast can get involved with, because this really is a good project. I'll let you explain it, Paul.
Yeah, no, I really like it. This is a completely side project. It's got 2 labels on it. It's called Your Voice. You can find it at yourvoicepodcast.com. But essentially what it is I realize that there are 2 audiences. There are people who will listen to podcasts like me, active people who want to listen, and then there's people who sit down and read. Neither one is wrong. What I realized was I didn't feel that there was anything facilitating that cross-marketing. So what Your Voice podcast is, and like Jonathan said, you, the listener, if you've got something, a personal story that you've written that you want to have heard, I want you to send it to me at Your Voice, because I would like to feature it. So essentially what it is it's reading of a blog, but I've got talented voice actors and folks like Brian Bristol, who works with me on Atheist Apocalypse as well. He's a producer and a writer and an actor on it, and he does a lot of the voice acting on that as well. And what we do is we read the letter or the blog. We provide a soundscape. So, one of the ones that he did was in episode 4, and he gave a coffee shop soundscape because it was set in a coffee shop. But if you've got a letter of pain, of triumph, of love lost, of hate, of anger, it doesn't matter. And you want people around the world to hear it. You want one individual person to hear it. I don't care, because this is a completely side project, like I said, and I freaking love people's stories. I love to hear people's experiences, and that's what I want to do with Your Voice. So if you have something, if you'd like to share something, if you'd like it in audio format, if you want to hear the show, go to yourvoicepodcast.com. If you want to send something to me, podcastyourvoice@gmail.com.
And by the way, just so the listeners know, Paul is used to dealing with sensitive subjects, so if you would like to remain anonymous, he will certainly make sure that you remain anonymous.
Oh, you're such a good man. You've always got my back. I forgot to mention that.
Yeah, I just know that's one of those things that you personally take a lot of interest in.
Definitely.
Making sure that everyone's comfortable in a situation.
It's more about sharing that experience than it is your identity. If you want your identity shared, I don't have a problem with that. I will, Jonathan, I'm grateful you said that. I will always default to the setting that you don't want your identity shared unless you tell me otherwise.
And I know that, I know you've done it in the past, especially with Grounify Me. I'm just going to add something else in that if the listeners, and I know you can do this, if you send your email in and you don't want to record, Paul can do it for you. Or I'm sure, because Paul's real good at editing, if you do send it and still want to remain anonymous, I'm sure you can mask their voice a little bit, can't you, Paul?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it's definitely.
So there's another option. If you still want to get that feeling inside through your voice, he can alter your voice in a way that it still comes through without you outing yourself.
And what I want to offer to your listeners is some of you will go to yourvoicepodcast.com and you'll see how to submit your story. But I love Jonathan. I love the stuff that he tries to do. If you're a listener of Jonathan's show, what I want you to do again is email me at podcastyourvoice@gmail.com. Tell me that you heard me on Jonathan's show, and I'm going to waive because I get way too many emails to deal with because I've got so many other projects. I basically charge folks so I can read through their crap, edit it. Not all of his crap, but some of it's, oh my God, some people cannot write. But what I want to do for your listeners, and because, Jonathan, you're a brother to me, is I want to offer to your listeners, just tell me you heard me on this show in your email. There is no $5 payment. There's none of that crap. Just send me your stuff, and I want to, if I can use your story, I want to be able to use your story.
That's awesome. Thank you very much. I'm just saying that, I can't. What's the opposite of retroactively?
Proactively.
Proactively. I'm proactively saying thank you for the listeners, because that's pretty cool.
Well, and again, it's that human thing. And I think that's why you and I relate so well, is because, you know, we may be assholes and we may be ex-military guys. We may be very candid, maybe sometimes too candid to a fault, but we have huge hearts. And that's really what, and, you know, your listeners may not believe that, but I'm not going to edit this out.
1, 2.
Chris, don't edit this out. Jonathan's got a huge heart.
Well, I try to. Mostly angina, but, you know. And I said angina. All right. Now, the last podcast is the one that we've already talked about, but I know your heart is in Atheist Apocalypse 100%. What's going to be happening new on Atheist Apocalypse?
I really challenge listeners to add something to your podcasting queue. I know the world is serious, that there's a lot of important things. I agree, there are. But there are times we need to decompress. Atheist Apocalypse is that. It's all written by atheists, believe it or not. All the crazy that you will hear in there, all the praise Jesus stuff that you'll hear in there, all of it, every single word is written by an atheist. We have a lot of fun. And like Jonathan said, don't be surprised if you hear a storyline about tipping literal sacred cows, because that's fucking genius. But yeah,
I was just throwing
I
that
love
out
it,
there,
man.
That is
but
funny.
the show is a lot of fun. And again, if you're not super sensitive, you're gonna love it. It's audio drama, so you know it's all fictional, and you've got to kind of get into the role. But if you're a fan of audiobooks, if you listen to audiobooks, or if you like to read fiction, you'll probably actually get into it. Season 2, listener feedback has been that we have really hit our stride compared to season 1. Season 1, you start out not knowing what's going on with the world, just that almost half the world's population has disappeared. By the end of season 1, you find out why. I'm not going to ruin that for you. And in season 2, that we just kicked off at the beginning of February, you start seeing the evolution of this post-apocalyptic world and how we would govern ourselves if things were to change. It's a whole lot of fun. We love input from listeners. We use it a lot. So if you have some thoughts, you can always check us out. We're on Twitter at AAP Podcast Show. I know all the other ones were taken. I apologize. But you can actually find us on atheistapocalypse.com, in iTunes and Stitcher as well.
You'll want to tune in for Jake's channel News 9 at noon or something like that. What's Jake's tagline?
Not KUSA 9 News at 9. And for anybody who actually picks up on that, I realize now that it's a real station in Denver. When we created the show, I did not know that. It was it just made sense to pick on, because there are no sacred cows, to pick on conservative Americans by using the station call letters of KUSA, right? So it all just fell together, and then lo and behold, somebody wrote me like after episode 1 and said, "Hey, you know that's a real radio or a real news station, right?"
And the bad thing is that, you know, now that I've looked back on it, of course it's a real news, real channel. One thing that I would like to point out that you didn't is this really is a full cast and produced podcast, radio drama, whatever you pod drama. Yeah. There's Foley in the background. It's it's just like an old time radio show. Well, I can't say old time, but it's fully produced with actors and back